All right. Hello. Welcome to our Wednesday lunch study break. Today is Wednesday, December 15th, 2021. And we're getting towards the end of the year. And we are going to continue, as always, this space for interesting theological exploration. And what I wanted to do today, and I asked Adam Lowy to join us here, is because on Shabbat, this week's Torah portion is Vayechi. In it, our patriarchs, Jacob and Joseph, pass away. And what we're doing at Congregation Beth Shalom is expanding on the ways in which we interact with Torah. And so we have this program that is coming up this Saturday morning for those of you who are interested. And it's called Deathbed Stories, a ritual of transgenerational communication. Join us in the Gronowski Family Chapel on Shabbat morning for Deathbed Stories, which will feature Adam Lowy, who is our lifelong learning Mora Derech, and performance artist David Israel Katz. Adam is here with us. And it's your ticket to Deathbed Stories is an heirloom object, so something you have received or something that you would like to hand down. Entering Gronowski Chapel, participants will place their object anywhere in the room. The resulting heirloom arrangement will then unfold into a living network of bodies, present and absent, still moving, sounding, and silent. Taking off from the story of Jacob's death, the ritual will open a portal to the collision of the past and future and turn physical heirlooms into now time encounters with Jewish spiritual inheritance. All right, that was a mouthful, but a good one. And so in preparation for that experience, I wanted to invite Adam here and to have a conversation around Jacob and around Yosef. And it's a significant parsha. And so what I want to do is give a little bit of an introduction, and then I'm going to show some video, and then hopefully we'll engage in a little bit of conversation around some of Judaism's relationship to death and perhaps some of your own. So the first thing that I want to do is share with you. You guys have known me long enough to know that I was Rabbi Neil Gilman, the Blessed Memories Research Assistant for many years at the seminary. He wrote the book, The Death of Death, about Jewish eschatology, which is the study of the notion of the end of days. And this is he had a book called Traces of God that I worked on with him. He worked on and I edited it, and we selected from a whole bunch of his Divrei Torah and his public writings, not the academic writing, but just Parsha. You guys know how much I love Parsha interpretation. So we picked from all of his Parsha interpretations and we put together this book. And this was the Parsha the essay for this week's Torah portion. And he titled it, Death is Over. He says, one of the great deathbed scenes in world literature concludes with these lines, "It's all over," said someone standing beside him. He heard these words and repeated them in his soul. Death is over, he said to himself. There is no more death. He drew in a breath, broke off in the middle of it, stretched himself out, and died. Rabbi Gilman says that when Tolstoy penned this description of the last seconds of the life of Ivan Ilyich, he was drawn to a 2,000-year-old tradition as to what happens to human beings after they die. From the 2nd century BCE until the dawn of the modern age, Judaism and then Christianity affirmed that the death of the human being does not signify the end of that person's relationship with God, that God's power extends beyond the grave, and that human beings would live again and come before God in judgment, and that at the end of days, death would die too. And I think what Adam and David are going to do this weekend is sort of this acknowledgement of this Jewish idea that the person's relationship with God does not end at the moment of death, nor does that person's relationship with us end at the moment of death. Rabbi Gilman says that death is over is the message of that memorable stanza of the Chad Gadya, which we sing on Passover. In that song, God is portrayed as slaughtering the angel of death. And after that, there is no more death. So he says the two biblical personalities whose deathbed scenes are described in this week's Torah portion did not have that tradition to draw on. The last words of Jacob and Joseph deal with what happened to their bodies after they die. And I have the text. We can take a look at it in a bit. Jacob asks to be buried with his parents and grandparents in the cave of Machpelah. And Joseph asks that when God brings the Israelites into the promised land, his bones should accompany them. And we know that that promise is kept. If there's a hint of immortality in those scenes, it lies in Jacob's extended prophecy of what will happen to his sons in the days to come. Neither Jacob nor Joseph nor any other biblical personality questions the finality of death, with the exception of Elijah, who never really dies but is taken into heaven in a chariot. Elijah is the herald of the coming of the Messiah. And the other exception is the early Genesis personality of Enoch, of whom we are told that he walked with God and then was no more, for God took him. But neither the patriarchs, nor Aaron, Moses, Tom Brady, I said patriots, Miriam are portrayed as expecting to live again, thankfully for us Jet fans. In fact, the very opposite is the case. When Jacob is told of Joseph's apparent death, he refuses to be comforted. He says, "No, I will go down mourning to my son in Sheol." And when his sons ask him to let them take Benjamin with them, he replies, "My son must not go to you, for his brother is dead and he alone is left. If he meets with disaster on the journey you are taking, you will send my white head down to Sheol in grief." So we see from this, Jacob has no hope, according to Rabbi Gilman, of being reunited with his children after death. And there are only two biblical texts that speak of the dead rising from the graves. We've studied them here. One is Daniel 12:12, which says many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awaken. And the other is from Isaiah 26, which says, "Oh, let your dead revive, let your corpses rise." And of course, we use that phrase in our Amidah, where God is portrayed as Mechayeh HaMeitim, as reviving the dead. So let me skip ahead here to where I want to get to. So that's a little bit of the background, just a little bit that I think we've discussed here on and off and in various degrees of depth for the past few years. So Rabbi Gilman says, "My annual encounter with these deathbed scenes reminds me that it was on this Shabbat 49 years ago, this Shabbat 49 years ago, that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel died. He died on Shabbat. This Torah portion this week, 49 years ago. But literally days before he died, he taped that memorable television interview that was later shown on JTS's Eternal Light program. And that interview constitutes Rabbi Heschel's last words. And so on this, the 49th yahrzeit of Rabbi Heschel's passing, I wanted to take a look with you at that interview so we can hear from Rabbi Heschel. That was my introduction to why I am teaching you Rabbi Heschel. So let's open up Rabbi Heschel, who is a marvel. So if you have never seen Rabbi Heschel before, you are in for a treat. Okay, so now remember, this was done just a few days before he died. So remember that this is basically, as Rabbi Gilman noted, Rabbi Gilman was his student. These were his final words publicly.
But that is the wonder of it, the torment that man has, the problem-solving machine that he is. That, you think, is, I detect, is the essence of being, of living a human life.
Yes, you see, that is true. No, but you see, one of the great sins of contemporary education is to give the impression you can solve all problems, or there are no problems. Actually, the greatness of man is that he faces problems. I would judge a person by how many deep problems he's concerned with.
But is not the quest of religion, though, to give one a sense of inner peace?
Now, you have to understand the meaning of inner peace. Let me give you first an example of a person who has no problems. Let me give you a dramatic, fictitious picture. Here stands a man, and I'll tell you, this is a man who has no problems. Do you know why? He's an idiot. Because a man has problems. And the more complicated, the richer he is, the deeper are his problems. This is our distinction: to have problems, to face problems. Life is a challenge, not just a satisfaction. And the calamity of our time is to reduce life to pleasure only. I'm not against pleasure, but the greatness of life is experience in facing a challenge rather than just having satisfaction. I would be frightened if I were to be ruled by a person who is satisfied, who has the answers to everything. In a very deep sense, religion has two things. First of all, it's an answer to the ultimate problems of human existence. And it also has another side. It is a challenge to all answers. It is living in this polarity of these 2 points.
But there are so many religions that say, come to us and you will have no problem. We will solve your problems. Here's the word of God. He will solve your problem. You don't accept that.
No, I don't accept it because it contradicts everything I have learned about life, from experience, from philosophy, from history, from the Bible. If I look at the Bible, God is full of problems. Imagine, he created man. He created man on his own will, out of his own freedom. And man is a problem to him. Look at the Bible. God is always wrestling with the problem of man. Even God has problems. This is a deep ingredient of existence, problems. And the tragedy of our education today is we are giving such easy solutions. Be complacent, have peace of mind, everything is fine. No, wrestling is the issue. Facing the challenge is the issue.
Would it be a better world if we were all of one religion?
No.
Would there be less strife?
No. As far as I can judge, and I try to judge God's will from history, it seems to be the will of God that there would be more than one religion. I think it's a very marvelous thing to realize. You know, if I were to ask the question, whether, the example I think I gave you before, whether the Metropolitan Museum should try to introduce that all paintings should look alike, or I should like to suggest that all human faces should look alike, how would you respond to my proposal?
I would be against it.
I'm glad. We agree.
I think also, though, in your writings, you've indicated that even where one religion has been adopted in the state, there's no evidence that has brought any happiness or any new high points of religious feeling. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I think it is the will of God that there should be religious pluralism. One of the most important things in life a human being faces is not only to know how to build a machine, but also how to overcome envy. It's an irrational, destructive power in every man. What does the school do about it? The secular school? Nothing. So I'm disappointed. American educational system, on all levels, has proved to be a terrible disappointment. Religious schools, it's a new problem. I only wish I could tell you the religious schools are doing a perfect job. I would say religious schools should deserve support because they are doing partly a good job. They at least teach people some of the great classical ideas of the religious tradition, and we cannot live without religious tradition. Because take away the religious tradition, what is left? You know what is left? Read contemporary literature and give the contemporary literature, the novels, as a source of inspiration for our young people. What will they get? The Psalms, no one reads. You're not allowed to read the Psalms in the school. How can you be human without being able to pray? We need religious education. The problem begins whether religious education is in such a splendid state. It isn't, but a separate problem. I think that aid to religious schools in some form that would not contradict the constitutional regulations would.
All right, so he gets into a little bit of the political, whether or not the government should provide aid to religious schools. I'm going to just cut that a little bit there, but pretty great. And I love that he says it's the will of God for religious pluralism. I mean, and diversity. That I find just outrageously compelling. What do you guys think? Before we're going to get into his views on death, and we're going to continue, but I didn't want to start right there. I wanted to give you a flavor of Rabbi Heschel and where he's coming from. And what is anybody want to say anything about what we've heard so far from Rabbi Heschel? You guys were totally unmoved by Rabbi Heschel. Okay, that's all right. That's, that's pretty much the impact he had on people. Come on. You guys were unmoved. There's a famous story. One of my, he was a harsh teacher, I heard. And so at the seminary, going to the seminary, you hear Heschel stories. Sure, of course. And so the story I heard was that Heschel would pick his forehead. He would pick his forehead. One day in class, he had a scratch on his forehead and he was going through the whole class and everybody was talking. And finally, at one point in the middle of the class, he struck blood and he started bleeding. And he says, wow, I penetrated my head more than any of you here in this class have done the whole day. So that's a little Heschel. Sandra.
I like what he said about people having problems. I thought that was very realistic.
Yes.
And he even said God has problems.
Yes.
Well, I'm thinking of this week's parasha about Abraham and Lot, rather, arguing with God. So God too.
Yes. No, God is full of problems and challenges, and that's sort of the. I like that he pushes back against prosperity gospel and against these religious messages that say that we shouldn't suffer. Jeff, I lost you, Jeff. Judah.
Yeah, in synchronicity, somebody just gave me this book.
Oh, there you go.
Have you read it? Do you know?
Is it good?
Shai Held. I haven't started it yet, but I thought, it's just arrived this week.
I love it.
Shai Held's a wonderful teacher.
Amen. I love that. Jeff. Jeff,
yeah. Well, you asked what if anybody had anything to say good or bad about Heschel.
Yes.
I've tried several times to read his books. I've never been able to get into them. One time I opened it, and I swear to God, it opened to a page in which he compared unbelievers to, he either said primitives or savages who couldn't understand orchestral music. And that's it, which then prompted Nehemiah Poland to tell me that I don't hear the divine music. And that was, I won't say that was the beginning of my way out the door, but it certainly didn't give me reason to turn around and reconsider. That's all I have to say.
No, that's a valid critique, I think. I think that's a very valid critique. I think sometimes there are people who the analogy to artistry doesn't necessarily work. I've been sort of going through this, Jeff. I actually spoke to a professor in the University of Exeter because I'm sort of figuring out the way my brain, I don't have any visual memory. So I process things not through imagery, but through other ways. And I just think everyone processes things differently. So to have a value judgment that says, because you don't hear the music or you don't see the picture, you can't understand God or have that spirituality, I think cuts against what Rabbi Heschel is saying here, which is that everybody should be uniquely represented and has their own unique ears and eyes and faces, and that we need religious diversity. So the idea that you're excluded from it because of your predisposition is offensive a priori. And I'm sorry that you were subjected to that. I think that's crap.
Well, it's too late. Heschel said I don't qualify, and who are you to disagree with Heschel? So that's it. I'm out.
Well, what do you think of what he just said right now? Did you disagree with what he just said? What you heard him say? Not what you heard third party. I want to know first person.
I think I only heard part of it because I as you can see, I'm driving and I logged in late. But it's God's will that religious pluralism. Look, I'm sure like anyone who thinks beyond a rudimentary level, I'm sure he was a man of contradiction.
You have allies on this call, Jeff. You have allies on this call.
Dan, my problem is none of this works for me, and I've never found. I haven't found anyone within the Jewish tradition.
So perfect. I'm going to go to Rabbi Susan. I'm going to go to Rabbi Susan Auerbach, who is joining us here, and she's a humanist rabbi. So she's had a study session with me, and she studied with me before, and she wants to participate as a guest to our program. So we're happy to have her here. And I think Jeff, maybe Rabbi Susan, I'm just going to call you Susan. You call me Dan.
Yeah, please.
Can speak to some of Jeff's concerns.
You know, what came to my mind as I was watching Heschel is the whole idea. I just finished reading Hybrid Judaism about Yitz Greenberg, and his focus on we're created in the image of God. And this is, God is a character in literature for me because I'm a humanist, but there's a lot of value in this idea of God, of attributes of God, whether it's a projection of ours or it's real, as people who believe in God feel.
Has anybody ever told you don't hear the music? Has anybody ever said to you, well, Susan, you just don't hear the music? I mean, has anybody ever said that to you?
No, no one has. No one has. But I really think that what he's saying, whether it's a projection or a reality, is it's true. If we're in the image of God, whatever that might be, we have problems. And it's realistic. That's what's great about Torah study. You don't have these beautiful, pure, positive people in these stories. Every single one of them is flawed, like we are. And I find that very inspiring, actually, what he says. I mean, however, as a spiritual leader, I would look to a person's personality makes a difference. And there's some real negatives there in the way he speaks. I wouldn't, you know, I like those stories of the people who go miles to see the Rebbe tie his shoes. I mean, it means something to me, you know, how a person acts. And if you're going to shame everyone around you who doesn't agree with you, then that's not a very high level of spiritual development.
Yeah, I agree on this. So I totally agree with you, Rabbi. And I think that that's why we're really stressing religious pluralism and diversity at Beth Shalom. I think the fact that you just heard Rabbi Heschel say that that's God's will for that religious pluralism and diversity. And I think as religious institutions, as the Jewish community, we get too obsessed with the right or the wrong way to do things, and our way being the right way, or your way being the wrong way to think about things. And that leads to, I think, the kind of attitudes that Jeff is reflecting back to us that makes him not want to have anything to do with it.
Exactly. Yeah. I was raised Orthodox, so believe me, I know about
where
rigidity. Chicago.
In Chicago. Thank
South
you.
Side.
Other comments before we go back to Heschel? All right, so let's go back to Heschel a little bit because there's more here I do want to get to.
To put the blame not only on the religious people, on the religious establishment, but also on the people who belong to that establishment, on the members, on the plain people. You see.
What, you think I was going to leave you guys? He's blaming not just the religious establishments, he's blaming the lay people too. Okay, just I want to clarify in case you missed that. Just want to clarify.
Actually, the role of religion has declined as a result of countless assaults from all directions. So what is the outcome? In the past, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, a parent who had a gifted boy had a great dream. His son should be a rabbi, a minister, a priest. Today, a man who has a gifted boy, like him to be a doctor of medicine, a banker, a lawyer. So the gifted boys are being kept away by many people, blame the people. But the religious leaders are to blame. There is a decline in religious thinking, religious passion, a detachment from the real problems. Let me say to you the following. The central problem in the Bible is not God, but men. The Bible is a book about men, rather than men's book about God. And the great problem is how to answer, to respond to the human situation. And somehow, religious leaders have often become petrified in their own traditions and understanding, and couldn't relate to the burning issues of the day.
How is it responding today?
How is it responding today? Not too well. A great many religious leaders have given up faith altogether. They are deluding themselves. As I told you before, self-deception is a major passion in human life. There are a great many people who use the word God and don't believe in it. Let me give you an example. One of the most popular definition of God common in America today was developed by a great Protestant theologian. God is the ground of being. So everybody's ready to accept it. Why not? Ground of being causes me no harm. Let there be a ground of being. Doesn't cause me any harm. I'm ready to accept it. It's meaningless. Isn't there a God who is above the ground? Maybe God is the source of qualms, disturbing my conscience. Maybe God is a God of demand. Yeah, this is God, not the ground of being. The result is we have religious institutions without a religious belief. We have a wave of non-belief. I have suddenly discovered that William James was not right when he spoke about, he was right, by the way. I'm saying it rhetorically. There is a will to believe, but there's today a will to disbelieve, and that will is very powerful. To this very day, our young people are craving for some deeper meaning. Our young people are craving for a religious outlook, and what they get is stone and not bread.
Well, what you've said, though, is that there's something more than relevance needed. That's an overused expression. You use the term in your writings, validity. Religion must have validity. What makes a religion valid?
No, if it is true, if it is it corresponds to real urgencies and questions and problems. Let me give you an example of what I mentioned to you before. Our entire civilization today revolves around one idea, interest or need. And we are taught the greatest thing in life is to satisfy one's needs and interests. Actually, our way of living revolves around one principle, self-interest, self-interest. There's nothing else but self-interest. This is a fallacy, according to religion, and religion is right, valid. Because if everything is self-interest, then there is no love. Can you imagine humanity without love? If love is only self-interest, then love is a fake, pretense.
You're telling me of the nature of man, not the nature of God, aren't you?
Yes, the nature of God is that man should have ends, not only needs. The difference between an animal and a man is not the needs. Animal has needs, man has needs too. But man, in addition to needs, has to have ends, goals to strive for. The great task of religion is to teach men how to convert ends into needs. But what we do instead is to convert needs into ends. And needs are unreliable as a standard because some needs are authentic, some needs are false. Look at advertisement. Advertisement is trying to evoke in us needs which we are not in need of. Can you imagine a day will come when I will feel all of a sudden I couldn't live without color television. Television is not enough, it has to be a color television. I will give away the last penny I have because advertisement has convinced me that without color television, I couldn't survive, right? And a million other things. I have to have at least a summer home and a winter home because without a winter home and a summer home, I'm not a respectable citizen. I read it in an advertisement. So it becomes a need. Religion says no. Man's distinction is to live by ends and for ends and goals, and not only satisfy needs. I am not against satisfaction of needs. That's a necessary function of man. We have to satisfy our authentic needs. It's very important. We are against asceticism. We love life, but there are also ends and goals to be served. And this is the difference between animal and man. But ask an average man, what are your goals in life? He'll tell you, life insurance, a Cadillac, and color television.
Well, that's cynical. So I'll say the first word there. That's some heavy duty cynicism there. Sandra?
Yeah, I was a little offended by that.
Yeah, right. Tell me. Good,
I-
good. That's okay. That's okay to be offended. That's good.
Such commercial.
This is 49 years ago. So remember the world
I
that he's.
I expect something more spiritual.
Yeah, you didn't expect to be lamenting about colored TVs and winter homes, right?
No.
Yeah. It's just that he's painting with a broad brush in a way that makes me slightly uncomfortable. Adam.
I mean, I think it's harsh in a lot of levels to hear what he's saying, but at another level, it just clearly states how off the rails he believed we were at that time. Like we were
And
off.
thankfully, Adam, we've corrected since then.
Right. I mean, it's kind of funny that you know, I think many would claim that we're even further off the rails than he ever would have expected back when he was saying these words.
Do you think he's right? What do you think of his relationship between needs and ends?
Well, I'm very curious to hear how death comes into this in the next few minutes, because I wonder what he means by ends. Ends is not a word that I think we use most these days when we talk about goals. I wouldn't say I've ever really used that word, ends. I think it may represent something more material for him, as he talks about the Cadillac, which I think is awesome. Also very dating on what car was hot and happening at that point. The Cadillac. As a Detroiter, I can appreciate that.
Tell me a little bit more about when he says ends. I think he means spiritual ends. Let me see if I can try to explain, because I think it's fascinating, the conversation around means and ends. I think he means that there are higher purposes that we want as opposed to the self-satisfaction of our base needs, right? I need to feel right. I need to feel safe. I need to feel full. I need to feel entertained. Those are all needs that commercial society will want us to feel either good or bad about, and we will respond to those needs. I think Rabbi Heschel is saying, look, let's not tap into that animalistic need-based. Let's appreciate the fact that we're spiritual beings simultaneously and have spiritual ends at play. I think Heschel's hard to understand because he likes to say two things at one time that are opposite, which I love about him, but it makes it hard to parse. That's why I'm curious to hear what Judah thinks about Rabbi Held's book. Lisa, you look like you want to say something.
I just think that we're not used to the harsh prophets.
Good. Tell me more about that. Very good.
I don't know if there's a lot more to say, but it's difficult to hear someone who's so sure of what he feels is important. I did notice that Time Magazine today declared Elon Musk the Man of the Year, which I find utterly shocking and disturbing.
They don't print, I mean, they don't have a print magazine, so I don't take their Man of the Year too seriously. If they're not actually printing copies of the magazine, then that's what I take of their Time Person of the Year award. I'm with you, but I think Musk, of all of those technologists, perhaps remains the most humanistic of the lot. And by the way, that's not exactly tough competition, but Susan is shaking her head, you know, because there aren't too many humanists in that lot. But I think Musk sort of stands out a little bit in his concern about artificial intelligence taking over basic humanity. So I think there's a little glimmer there.
He moved his business to Texas to save money, Texas, which does not respect women's choices.
Well, so, I'm not going to say he's not a businessman. I'm just saying that he, as opposed to other people, I'm not here to defend Elon Musk, but as opposed to other technologists who believe that we can upload our brains into the metaverse and live there indefinitely, Musk says, well, wait a minute, let's, like artificial intelligence, let's not go too far. We have to. So it's like, so if you're choosing between evils, at least I like the guy who's a little concerned that we're going to lose a sense of our humanity. Okay, so let's get back. Adam Lowy still has his question. Where does death come in? All right. Well, death comes in because this is his final interview given just days before his passing. And in this final part, he's going to talk about death.
You wrote a volume entitled Who is Man? You dealt with some of these questions. Is there anything else you want to add to your definition?
Oh, out of pain and anguish I wrote that book, because I consider men to be left without friends in the world. Wherever I look, books I read, it's full of contempt for the nature of men, the naked ape. Man is all violent, Man is essentially an animal. America spends hundreds of millions of dollars to study the behavior of animals in order to understand man, because essentially man is an animal. And I'm asking you, what a bigger insult is it to man to say that man is essentially a beast, except he has the ability to make tools, so to speak? My definition of an ape is a human being without the ability to speak. Just as well as to say that man is an animal with the ability to speak. No, what I try to do in this book is to to fight the ongoing dehumanization of man, which I see in every step everywhere. Unless I feel that my life is accountable to him who is much greater than I am, I could not always control my mean leanings. I would not only be ready for self-sacrifice, number one. Number two, my life would be poor. The deepest passion in any real human person is a craving for meaning of existence. What kind of meaning of existence can I find in the fact that I can make a few dollars? That I have a little success? Here I am, and tomorrow I'm gone. What's the meaning of everything? What's the meaning of our society? What's the meaning of our world? God is the meaning beyond absurdity. Wherever I go, I encounter absurdity.
Consistent with the Jewish faith, you never write much, in fact, I don't recall you writing at all about a life hereafter. Lots of religions are predicated on the idea of salvation rather than this earthly existence. You don't talk about that sort of thing. Why is that?
Actually, I did write an essay on this problem, which I read at an international conference on death, etc., in Florence about 3 years ago. But frankly, I'll give you the real answer. We believe in an afterlife, but we have no information about it.
And therefore you can't write about it?
Can I write about it in terms of belief?
Or expectation? Or hope?
I did. I did.
But you think that's less important than life on Earth?
I think that's God's business, what to do with me after life. Here, it's my business what to do with my life. So I leave it to him. I am so busy trying to live a good life and don't always succeed. I have no time to worry what God is going to do with me once I'm in the grave. Who knows what he wants to expect me to be doing the grave?
And through all of this, I find its uniqueness in your feelings of a collaborative effort between God and man.
Yes.
It's a sharing.
Yes.
It's a powerful concept. I'm not sure I know how we can help God.
You see, there is an old idea in Judaism found in the Bible, strongly developed by the rabbis, and very little known. And that is that God suffers when man suffers. There's a very famous text that says, even when a criminal is hanged, the gallows, God cries. He says, woe unto me. He's very unhappy when man is unhappy. There is this great sympathy of God and part of man. God identifies himself with the misery of man. I can help him by reducing human suffering, human anguish, and human misery.
We have just about a minute or so left. I should say at the start of this hour, before we began.
All right, so we'll get to his conclusion, which is fun. But let's pause for a second here around his idea of death. What did you make of the funny way, I'll categorize it as funny way, that Rabbi Heschel answers those questions? That was awkward. Did anybody else feel the awkwardness around that, or was it just me? Oh, come on, it was just me. Susan, go right ahead.
I'm used to a very similar discussion that anyone would have in my group. We don't know, so we don't know,
So you didn't, but did you, the way he answered it was, I answered that, I wrote about that. I wrote about that 3 years ago in a conference in an international committee, but I'll tell you the real truth, we don't know. I just thought it was funny. The way he answered it seemed different, right? Lisa said, I think, rather poignantly, in a way that I think we could spend a lot of time on, which is we're not used to hearing prophets speak this way. And our first reaction is to say, to heck with you. You know, when we hear someone speaking that way. So that's a part of this, but then when Carl Stern asks him about life after death, he doesn't have that same voice anymore, Lisa. You notice he shifts entirely and he goes from this very confident person to be, I wrote about that 3 years ago, but let me tell you the truth. It's interesting. His demeanor shifts slightly. Sandra Cohen, what did you want to say?
Oh, I didn't have my hand up, but I didn't feel that it was awkward.
Okay, good. You liked his answer.
Well, I thought, yeah, because God has God's problems and issues, is what he's saying. You know, he said God has problems before, and man has his or her problem to live a good life. It's a different realm.
Are you satisfied with his answer of what happens to you after you die?
Well, we don't know what happens to us. He doesn't talk about any spiritual thought. That's what I'm a little disappointed that he doesn't bring out spiritual things. Yeah. He talks in this commercial level, and I would expect more of him. Maybe he's on his deathbed, so to speak. He's tapped out.
I don't know if he's aware of that. But he is aware of the fact that he's in a popular medium. So maybe that explains why he's trying to use perhaps popular colloquialisms like Cadillac and whatnot, which he's probably heard on TV also. So he's perhaps trying to adjust his language to fit into that medium. That's a dangerous thing. I've fallen prey to that. Judah.
Yeah, you know, the expression walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And I thought that's exactly what he did. I mean, this is what Judaism says. We don't know. That's why it's not in the Torah. That's not why they're telling us. So we don't know. So we have to be concerned about what's here. So that's what he did. And, you know, the guy was asking him questions. He said, I can't talk about it. You know, I wrote about it. I talked about it. Yep. You know, I don't have the answer.
I don't know, dude.
What's happening? This is what's happening. And by the way, yeah, today it would be what? Alexis and his son would be a hedge manager.
Tesla.
Tesla. The times have changed. Yeah.
I did think about that. I go, I'm not going to say it. I was like, I don't know how many people still root for banker and lawyer. That's an interesting thing, but maybe there are. Okay, so Rabbi Gilman, let's go back to Rabbi Gilman. Many portions that we're going to come back to, I'm going to end with Rabbi Heschel, but let me go back to Rabbi Gilman first. Many portions of that interview remain fresh in my mind, but two are worth recalling here. First, when Rabbi Heschel was asked what he anticipates will happen to him after he dies, he brushes aside the question. He has far too much to do during his lifetime. He is prepared to let God worry about what happens after he dies. The second is that remarkable last minute of the conversation, which I'm going to show you now. So that part annoys, just to double down on this, that part really annoys Rabbi Gilman. And this is another book we worked on, was an academic book that he writes here. And in it, hold on. In it, he said here, at the same time, he goes, I recall with particular pain my late teacher, Abraham Joshua Heschel's comments in a television interview that he gave just weeks before he died in 1972. Carl Stern of NBC asked him, Heschel did not know he was about to die. What do you think is going to happen after you die? Heschel responded, I have so many things to worry about while I'm alive. I'll let God worry about what happens to me after I die. How could Heschel not think about what was going to happen to him after he died? That, for Rabbi Gilman, is baffling and pretty much led to a lot of his career thereafter, because for Rabbi Gilman, and perhaps for me when I was in my 20s, not thinking about death in light of 9/11, in light of everything going on in our world, which was not a possibility for me. And that's what attracted me to Rabbi Gilman and a lot of his study. All right, so let's go to the last minute, the remarkable last minute that Rabbi Gilman calls.
And this hour, Dr. Heschel indicated an interest in directing a message at young people, and I don't know that I ever in the past hour gave you the chance I promised you that I would give you.
I would say to young people a number of things, and I have only 1 minute. I would say let them remember that there is a meaning beyond absurdity. Let them be sure that every little deed counts, that every word has power, and that we can do everyone our share to redeem the world, in spite of all absurdities and all the frustration, all disappointment. And above all, remember that the meaning of life is to build life as if it were a work of art. You're not a machine. When you are young, start working on this great work of art called your own existence. And the best way, and one of the ways of doing it, or two ways of doing it, is one, remember the importance of self-discipline. Second, study the great sources of wisdom. Don't read the bestsellers. And third, remember that life is a celebration, or can be a celebration. There's much of entertainment in our life. And entertainment is destroying much of our initiative. It weakens our imagination. What's really important is life as celebration. In a very deep sense, I would say that the addiction, the drug addiction, which so many people suffer, is due to the fact that man cannot live such a shallow life, stale. He needs exaltation. He needs moments of celebration. One of the most important things is to teach men how to celebrate life.
You talked earlier of slanders. May I give you an example of something which is not a slander? Perhaps the most astute comment on your work was made by Professor Marty of the University of Chicago, and he said Rabbi Heschel's work, unlike other philosophers, is directed not only at the mind, but at the heart and the will. I couldn't have said it so perceptively. Thank you very much for being with us.
Okay, so you all are the young people. What did you think of his advice to you? Susan.
I think it's terrific. I think it's terrific, you know, look at the wisdom, except now in our time, we have the privilege of being exposed to all kinds of wisdom, not just the rabbis, but, you know, all this Buddhist literature that has come here, and everything.
I love that. So I'm really happy you joined, because this will surprise everybody on this call. I have an affinity for humanism. And I'm curious, I heard when he said we need to find moments of exaltation. How do you, as a humanist rabbi, what is exaltation to you? How do you understand? For me,
and it's interesting. I mean, I probably shouldn't say this. I mean, I used to lead a community, and people they wanted it to be very intellectual, and it didn't work for me. Music, poetry, a lot of it is music for me. I mean, personally, music, sometimes poetry, community, meditation. There all kinds of ways. And
how have you gotten past some of the I guess the reactivity, the reactive nature to the poor way in which the name of God or exaltation has been used in the past? You are outrageously enlightened, as you're not bothered by these aspirations or these abilities to reach God. You can immerse yourself in the meditative, the poetic, the musical aspects of it without being triggered. See, there are a lot of people who get triggered.
You know what helped me, Klal? There's a retreat center back east where I went, and rabbinic students go to this retreat center and meet people from all different denominations.
Was this Pearlstone? Was this Pearlstone?
Friedman. I think it's Friedman.
Okay.
Center. And this group was actually created by Yitzhak Greenberg many years ago. And I went with my chip on my shoulder. I'm a humanist, you know, don't talk about God to me. And the first night of the retreat, everyone was asked to talk about what's an idol to them or something like that. I can't remember the details, but I did my usual. Even as a child, when the Torah came around and everyone was kissing it, I experienced that as idolatry. And I talked about that. Meanwhile,
can I stop you? When I was in rabbinical school 20 years ago, when I went home to Long Island, and I got an aliyah because I was a rabbinical student, and the rabbi said, kiss the Torah here. I said, no, I don't kiss anything. It's a avodah zarah. And he said to me, so that, right? And he said to me, so that's why you're single.
That's funny, because then we paired off. People wanted to pair off and talk about what they had heard. And this guy in the seminary in New York, the one that Avi Weiss leads, and they're the only Orthodox group that will come to this.
Yeah, Chovevei Torah, yeah.
Yeah, Chovevei Torah. He comes to me, he says, Susan, you know, it hurt me so much what you said, because Torah is my family. And he talked about it almost in tears. And I realized there are lots of ways to look at this, and we have to be respectful.
Yep.
But I can experience what I can't. I'm here to serve people who, the 29%, it's in the Chronicle today, the nuns, N-O-N-E-S. There are people, I left the fold when I was a teenager, and I can go into that if we ever do a session on this, I'll talk about it. But what brought me back to Judaism was this movement where I wouldn't have to say words I didn't believe. Because when I hear the words, the traditional prayer, it doesn't have meaning for me. So it's void of any spiritual sense. It's just something that annoys me, because I'm saying
you're not alone. You are not alone. As you say, the 29%, you know, you are not alone. And I have plenty of congregants who get similarly annoyed. And I think what's important for us to appreciate is that not everyone who stood at Sinai heard the same thing the same way.
Right.
And that what we're trying to do. And so to come back, I'm going to finish where we started with Adam Lowy. So Adam Lowy is running this Explore program. You can unmute yourself now, Adam. Adam is our lifelong learning Mora Derech. And the Explore program is based around this idea that not everybody is going to perceive religion and God in the same way. Not everyone is going to accept Torah by sitting and listening to it chanted in the original fashion, but that we have to create new creative artistic ways to do that in ways that honor our ancestors, but speak to us here. So Adam, tell us a little bit about what you plan on doing and sort of your guide around Explore and what we've been talking about here.
Yeah, thank you. Also, thanks to everybody for sharing your feelings and feedback and response to Rabbi Heschel. Before I tell you a teeny bit about Explore, I also something that really struck me right before he actually started talking about death. I don't know if anyone else saw it, is like he hugged himself. Did anyone else see that moment that he fully embraced himself, which was powerful? And he said it, he did that right after he said that everyone's craving for a meaning of existence. And there was just something there about that physical gesture that he subconsciously, I'm assuming that was very subconscious that he did that. And it was just powerful. Talk about prophetic, who knows that maybe it was a moment that he realized that his ends were about to come. So I just wanted to point that out.
Oh, that is beautiful. And that's why we have Adam here. See, I'm listening. I process everything through my ear. Adam is embodied Judaism. And that's why we brought him and have him as our lifelong learning Mora Derech, because we need to be more embodied. And so tell us a little bit about what you're going to do.
So interesting, the neat thing about Explore, that I have the honor of working with David Israel Katz, who's just really looks at I think our tradition in a very alternative way, and has really encouraged me to do the same.
They've seen the wrestling, the Shema here. They're familiar. I'm talking to you, Judah. Judah was
did they see his burning of the
yes yeah. We saw the burning of the scroll. Yes.
So interesting, David and I, when we plan these events, we actually don't, to a large degree, are uncertain what's going to unfold, because it's not a frontal experience. It is something that the participants are fully going to drive as much as David and I might drive the experience. And this, David likes to provoke. And so it was very conscious of him to call this Deathbed Stories, right? Because that's intriguing, right? And it might even be unsettling, which is very much what we're aiming for. We want us to get to a place of connection to spirituality that starts with discomfort. And I think that on some level, like that notion that Heschel shared at the beginning about a man's living when he's challenged, right? And I think that personally, I grew up with a relationship to Judaism that was very much going to make everything better for you and safer, and it's going to work out, and everything you're going to get your needs met. And I think the older I get, the more I realize that that we're missing out on some opportunities in Judaism. And so David and I are going to use these objects, which who knows why somebody decided to give you that Kiddush cup? Who knows why somebody decided to give you a Megillah, and why that was kept from 200 years ago. I think that there's good reason, and I think that that we can engage with our objects in a way that we're hoping, I would say, to engage with them in a way that they don't necessarily get engaged with. Meaning, what's the stories? What's the communications that have been sent, or that we can then leave? Do you know
what object you're gonna bring?
I'm actually bringing a few because I want to. But it actually, ironically, that these objects entered my family through my wife. They're not actually directly handed to me, but I find them to have great. I miss that I didn't get anything like that from my parents, and my parents are still living, but I don't feel like I have anything that they've handed to me. So I'm actually bringing. One thing is, I don't see these much, but it's actually an etrog holder. This beautiful metal etrog holder that has a top and Hebrew script on it that Shira's father gave to her. And then there's also a Megillah, a scroll, a Megillah of Esther that Shira's mother gave to us, that was given to her for sure by her father, and it is it stinks, right? I mean, it has a stench. It's real animal parchment, and so you stick your nose inside this thing, and that's a little different than sitting in the synagogue and having someone read from Torah for me, right? And so we're going to encourage that we integrate with our senses to these objects, and that we're not going to talk as much as we can avoid talking, and we're going to see how it unfolds as we engage with these objects. So there's room for more. If you're up for an unusual Saturday morning, I would love to see you all.
So people bring an object and they come to the chapel at 10 o'clock on Saturday. Is that right?
Yep.
And then after that, they join us for the Kiddush, correct?
Please, yes. We're going to go from 10 to 11:30 roughly. Again, we have some uncertainty about the duration based on what happens when we actually engage with a room full of people and a room full of heirloom objects, or hand-me-down objects, as we like to call them at this point. I'm happy to field any questions. If you are going to come, we just would love for you to register, which you can do on the website, just so we have a sense of numbers. And I look forward to seeing you there or around the community elsewhere. But thank you.
I'm going to put the link if you want to participate in this. I've had the privilege of talking to some of you here on this call about recent losses that you have suffered, and about things that you have learned in investigation of what was left behind, the stories and the people. So this is a beautiful opportunity. I'm going to be in the main sanctuary. We're going to be chanting the Parsha of Vayechi as per usual. But for those who want to have a different experience, we're going to be a pluralistic, a diverse community and provide different opportunities. And we're very privileged to have Adam Lowy exploring with us. So thank you, Adam. It's 1 o'clock. Any final questions? Next week, I'm going to do one of my favorites. It's December 22nd. It's December 22nd. So we're going to look at the Gospels. Okay. That's right. Tell everyone. I was nervous to put it up on social media, but we're going to look at the Gospels, and we're going to look at Jill Levine is she's one of my favorite academics. There we go. Susan has the book. She is one of my absolute favorite academics. Jill Levine. I saw her speak at the Bible study in Manhattan, and she has a few wonderful books on the Gospels, and one particular book called the Hebrew Bible annotated, the Christian Bible annotated, the Jewish Christian Bible. Hold on, I'll open it up here. There we go. The annotated, thank you. The Jewish annotated New Testament. Now you might wonder, how in the world can the New Testament be Jewishly annotated? Well, what Professor Jill Levine does is she goes through the Gospels in particular, and she pulls out where Jesus is quoting from what. And if you go and you open any Bible and you see those words in the New Testament, which are read, the words are read because they're spoken by Jesus, so they have a different coloring. Almost all of those words are lifted from our Tanakh. Those are almost all Isaiah, biblical quotes, biblical scriptures. And what she does in that book is she annotates it, and she shows you where Jesus is pulling these references. And I think it might be fun to look at that and to do some interfaith conversation next Wednesday. So if you know of anybody, Jew, Christian, who wants to participate, please invite them, because we're going to take a look at that next week. What was that?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan.
Thank you for inviting me to the
please bring more people. I really appreciated your insight, because it is the one thing that I totally admire and aspire to, your humanistic. I mean, I love SAJ. I love Rabbi Kaplan. Everybody knows I'm an apologist for God. You know I'm an apologist for God. But often my apology for God comes because I think it is through our theism that we come to protect our humanism. And so I look forward to engaging you in lots more conversations around that. And maybe we can even have you for a People on the Path. Adam Lowy is our People on the Path. That's a once a month program that we have interesting people throughout the Jewish community. Adam, share about People on the Path with Rabbi Susan.
Yeah, I was absolutely thinking about that, Susan. People on the Path is our attempt to bring interesting, dynamic people who have found themselves where they are on their personal journey, through and throughout Judaism, I would say, in and without Judaism, kind of as you described, as part of your path. It's really an opportunity for us to show that even those that we kind of consider very active in Jewish life, it wasn't such a linear path that they got to in that moment, as a way to encourage others to celebrate, as Rabbi Heschel said, to celebrate where they are, when they are, and to keep going. And so I would love to have a conversation with you if you are interested in a future date.
Maybe at some point in the future. I'm still being fairly COVID.
Oh no, it's all Zoom. It's all Zoom.
Oh.
And send her some of the other ones, or send the link to where you can see he's had some amazing rabbis and thinkers who have completely different paths. And I think for me, this denominationalism always seemed slightly farcical to me, because I don't know a single human being who stayed in one denomination and went from the time that they were born until they're 80 years old in the same denomination. I've never met a Jew who hasn't popped around into every.
You haven't met some of my relatives.
Lisa, what did you want to say?
I just quickly wanted to say that Adam's interview with Seth Brisk was very inspiring. He's an amazing person. So watch it. It was very worthwhile.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
And
I put the link up if anyone wants to see the whole archive of People on the Path. It's up there. And I should just say, I'm going to bring us back to the body, because that's kind of how I connect to my Jewish as well. If you are going to come to explore, bring socks that'll keep your feet warm, because we will remove our shoes at this ritual event. We will remove our shoes. So come with your best wool socks on.
All right. And that has nothing to do with your olfactory sense that you referred to earlier. And with that, We will end. Thank you all. Take care. Wonderful to have this conversation.
Thank you.
So long.
Bye-bye.